conspiracy theory is a way of trying to discredit inquiry. I mean, it's perfectly legitimate to say, here is a very, very serious event that occurred. It killed thousands of people right off the bat. It's killing firefighters still today. It's used to justify war. It's killed thousands of American soldiers. It's killed millions of Iraqis and Afghanis. It's literally in the millions. And to consider that investigating the roots of that is somehow not legitimate, or that you have to be somehow psychologically impaired, some sort of conspiratorial thinking. They're trying to psychologize all this to where people can dismiss people who even ask these questions. I think it's being a responsible citizen to ask questions of your government and to not just take what they say without any kind of critical thought.
9/11 was done by people in our own government and our own banking system to perpetuate the fear of the American people into subordinating themselves to anything the government wants them to do.
The terrorists attacked us and killed 3,000 of our citizens. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
Until we discover what really happened on 9/11 and who was responsible for 9/11, because that's where the war on terror emanates from. That's where it comes from. It was 9/11 that allowed this war on terror to begin. And until we get to the bottom root of 9/11, the truth of 9/11, we'll never know about the war on terror.
I represent 1,550 architects and engineers who are calling for a real investigation into the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center high-rises on 9/11.
One thing that really caught my attention in one of the videos was looking at when the North Tower was coming down, stuff being thrown out to the side, and it seemed like it was getting thrown way out to the side. And there was clearly heavy chunks of material being thrown very great distances. And I literally stopped the video, on the screen, on the television, and took out a ruler and stepped through a little bit of it. And I looked up some distances off the internet for the width of the building and everything. And I estimated the speed of ejection horizontally of some of these chunks of stuff. And I came up with an estimate around 60 miles an hour. And that seemed so anomalous to me. I figured, no way. How do you throw? There had to be tons of stuff that they're throwing horizontally at such high speeds. And this was high in the building. I even figured out at one point that the roof line, the building as it was coming down, by the time the roof line came down to the place where that stuff was thrown out, it was not going even 60 miles an hour then. So this stuff is being thrown horizontally faster than the building is even coming down.
No high-rise has ever come down due to fires.
They claim that they considered explosions, and they ruled them out based on the fact that they were not credible because they weren't loud enough. And that was their criteria, that was their justification for not looking at data about explosions.
Quote, "At that point a debate began to rage because the perception was that the building looked like it had been taken out with charges." In other words, not merely that it came down because of explosions in some general sense, but that the building had been rigged for demolition. They were debating that before 10:30 in the morning on 9/11.
We made it outside, we made it about a block.
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
If they
detonated,
were planned
yeah.
to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running.
All of a sudden I looked up, and about 20 stories below, at least that's what it looked like to me, about 75 flights up, below the fire, I saw from the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits. Just went down, and then I just saw the whole building just went.
But take a close look now at the corner where you see developing a series of explosions rapidly advancing down the corner of the building much faster than the rest of these explosions, almost as fast as the free-falling objects. Let's take a look from below. A lot of violent activity with squibs, isolated explosive ejections occurring underneath.
This is a collapse in New Zealand from the earthquake, unfortunately. And what do we have here? What do we see? We see pancakes. We see large chunks of floors. This was a 6 or 7 story building that came down. What did we see at ground zero? We had 110 floors. Did we see one complete floor? How about the roof? Did we see the roof? There was no load on top of the roof. We see nothing. We see cut steel, all cut up steel, but no 1 acre size floors.
This building had 47 massive core columns. At the base, almost solid steel, 52 inches by 22 inches, thinning to 2 inches at the mid-height, and to the lightest part of the structure, up at the top, as little as 3/8 of an inch thick, those steel members. So when you see the building coming down in the videos, realize what we're talking about here. There's more steel on the facade of this building with these 14-inch square tube columns every 3 feet 9 inches marching across this building than there is windows. That collapse had to come down through this steel. Here's the North Tower. We're told this upper block drove the rest of the building down. The planes hit here. There's no movement down from here until about now. Once again, this upper block is destroying itself in what can only be described as a miniature controlled demolition, if you will, of the top 15 stories. There's nothing left to drive the rest of the building down at any speed.
We can see from these photos that the towers appeared to have exploded, starting at the top and then going all the way down. Also, high-velocity bursts of debris shot out from 10 to 30 floors below the collapsed front. At the top of each tower, the debris appeared to shoot upward and outward as much of the solid structure turned to dust. Some large steel column assemblies were shot outward for hundreds of feet. A theory that was claimed to be the most probable root cause for many years, called the pancake theory, in which the floors pancake down upon each other, is no longer supported by NIST. It's really no longer supported by anyone.
Up until 9/11, we had never had a collapse of a protected steel building.
The truth has to come out. That's why I'm doing this interview. The fact of the matter happens to be that the whole war on terror is a fraud. It's a farce. Yeah, there's a war going on in Iraq because we invaded Iraq.
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
There's just so many anomalies, so many things that are absolutely dead wrong that are still being promoted today as a myth to the general public. And the general public, in my opinion, is buying it. They're probably just like I was. Before I look into the details, well, sure, why wouldn't you buy it? But the devil's in the details. That's where you have to look, and that's where this whole thing just comes apart at the seams.
We have focused on the strongest evidence and reasoned arguments that the official account of 9/11 is not true, that some part of our democratic state is guilty of mass murder of its citizens. We do not and should not trust a secretive government operating in the shadows, committing atrocities, and using the instruments of power to keep us in the dark.
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.